Hello, and welcome to the Michigan Department of Education's Teaching Comprehensive History webinar series. I'm Jen Saylor, an Assistant Director of the Office of Educational Supports with the Michigan Department of Education. Today's presentation intends to promote and encourage teaching the full and complex history of our country and world, while providing educators additional perspectives. As we expand our knowledge, we will be better able to create lessons that help students meaningfully engage with history. We are proud to partner with institutes of higher education, cultural centers, the Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments, bringing their research and expertise directly to Michigan educators. Teaching Comprehensive History webinars are intended to lift the content knowledge of educators to assist attendees' efforts with creating unique learning spaces for students. We hope these webinars lift your efforts in creating student-centered learning environments that include inquiry, critical thinking, and exploration from multiple historical perspectives you may not have heard before. As you listen today, you are encouraged to consider how this content and perspectives could be incorporated to enhance learning in your community. Now it is my honor to introduce today's presenters, Jordan E. Shenaniquet and Michelle Sims. I appreciate your patience and understanding as I am learning pronunciations and language and have much to learn. Jordan E. Shenaniquet currently resides in her ancestral homeland, Wagakising, the land of the crooked tree, across the shores of northern Michigan. As Sturgeon Clan, one of Jordan's gifts is being able to weave together a different knowledge system and share that knowledge with others. At the Michigan Department of Education's Indigenous Education Initiative, Jordan supports the Indigenous history work. Before joining IEI, Jordan served in her tribal nation as the Ngondwin Education Department Director. Jordan furthered her work in advancing tribal educational sovereignty through her role as the Inangadong chairperson for the Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments, as well as the chairperson for Bay Mills Community College Board of Regents. Jordan received 2 bachelor's degrees in history and cultural anthropology, along with minors in Native American studies and classical studies from the North Carolina State University. As a graduate student at NC State, she spent 3 semesters studying the history of her people, the Anishinaabe. Being an Anishinaabe Odawa, Kwe, or woman, has reinforced her love of history and culture, which has informed her identity both personally and professionally. Her sense of home, and thus history, is rooted in her ancestors. They are one and the same. Michelle Sims is a member of the Grand Traverse Bay of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians in Traverse City, Michigan. She has been married to her husband, Stephen, for 18 years. They have 2 teenage sons, Stephen and Abel. She is a pre-K-12 education specialist for Nottawasepi Huron Band of the Potawatomi. In June, she will be graduating from Western Michigan University with her master's degree in educational and global leadership. Michelle has been an educator for 30 years. She taught grades K-5 for 20 years and has been in Indigenous education for the last 10 years. Currently, she serves as the vice chair for the Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments, or CMTED. Through this position, she received the invitation to work with MDE's Indigenous Education Initiative on telling Anishinaabe history in what is now called Michigan. Michelle's passion is sharing her life stories to encourage others to help marginalized people find their voice. She believes it is important to know who you are and that your voice matters. The history work being done now will create brave spaces for Indigenous students to find belonging in our schools. And now, without further delay, it's my pleasure to welcome Jordan and Michelle. We are grateful you are with us today and look forward to our learning.
Chimigwech, Jen, and again, Chimigwech for being brave yourself and trying out those Anishinaabe words. I know it's not always easy, but I think you demonstrated too that it's important to be in these spaces and to try. First, I'm actually going to turn it over to Michelle to start us out with a story. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Michelle.
Okay. Ani Buju, Michelle Sims Indigenous, Odawa Indau, Mukwa Indodum, Anishinaabe Akin and Dojaba, Miigwech. That is my introduction in my Anishinaabe language that I'll talk to you a little bit about later. So my name is Michelle Sims. I'm Odawa and I come from the Bear Clan. I come from the land of the Anishinaabe. Thank you for being here today. As we talk about honoring connections, I want to take you on a journey. The girl in the picture you're looking at, she's looking at the world from her Anishinaabe perspective. Everything is connected. We invite everyone to look at the work we are doing through an Anishinaabe lens. I want to tell you part of my story. It's really small, um, of how I came to know my own cultural identity. So I'm a member of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. And you may know the Three Fires of Michigan as the Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi, but we call ourselves the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Bodwatomi. And those words will be important as we get into the session a little bit later. But growing up, my grandfather did not teach the language and the culture to his children, possibly for fear of them being taken away during the assimilation policies during that time. So my father did not know his Anishinaabe culture or language and therefore did not pass it on to me nor my siblings. So at the age of 42, I basically just knew that I was a Grand Traverse member and that was pretty much it. So prior to learning this, I spent, as you heard, 20 years teaching in the public school system for grades K through 5. And one of the places that I taught at was Miami at a small school. Well, Miami's huge, but the school wasn't that huge, but at a K through 12 school in Miami, Florida. And in the 5th grade class for history, we taught about the 1700s. And that was the first time that I heard of Chief Pontiac. And then I found out that he was Odawa. And I was like, hey, I've never heard this before. And I've never seen somebody from Anishinaabe in a history book. So that was pretty interesting. And it made me feel seen and heard. And it was a neat thing to be able to teach the students, of course, what was in the history book, because that's all I had to go on. But that was one of the first times that I thought about who I was in my Anishinaabe identity. But I didn't realize that 10 years later, I would start my own journey in learning who I was. So that brings us to 2016, and I took the job as the pre-K through 12 education specialist for Nottawasepi here on Band of the Potawatomi. And part of my job there was to attend the National Indian Education Association convention that they have every year. And the first time that I went, just to see this big sea of people that looked like me, that sounded like me, and I immediately felt a connection. I felt like I was at home. And there was a sense of belongingness that I didn't even realize was missing in my life. So I was just like, wow, this is really neat to have this. And so each year I get to go and get to learn more and have that belongingness. Another part of my work with Nottawasepi is I had to be on CMTED, the Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments. And this is really where I began to learn and grow and know who I am. It's been an awesome experience. In the beginning, I was intimidated. Jen was there from the very beginning from the IEI, and I just was in awe of how she spoke and the things she said. And just the knowledgeable people that CMTED had, like Jordan, who's on the call with us today, and Melissa, and all that they knew about the culture. And I was just amazed. But I began to grow and learn, and I definitely learned to love them and all of CMTED. And it became home to me. That's really where I felt like I belonged, and to have that sense of being seen. And that was the first place that I felt like my voice mattered, and just all of the things that were able to come from that. And now I'm the Ekonijin Gagidad, which is the vice chair for CMTED. So it's been a really great journey with them. And because of CMTED, I got hooked with IEI, which is the Indigenous Education Initiative, the other people that we're here with today, and all the opportunities. Being able to speak on a panel at Central Michigan University with Indigenous education came out of that relationship. going to a listening session when we were working on the social studies state standards and getting to give a public comment. So I began to grow in my voice and kind of come out of that shyness that I had, and knowing that my voice mattered. And then also just having access to MDE, getting to come and talk to you all today. Just that relationship has really grown between CMTED and IEI. So over those 6 years, I went to conferences, meetings, grew my relationships, and then I decided that I should go back to school. And so in 2022, I started in the fall with my master's of educational and global leadership. And that is important to me because when we talk about, the Michigan Indian tuition waiver, I didn't really understand it. And I think a lot of people don't understand it, but it was from a treaty right that I was able to go to school and have that taken care of. And so I do not take that lightly because I know a lot of suffering and hardships came from that. But the fact that I'm taking advantage of it now and speaking my language and learning my culture has just been a really good thing. And I'm so glad to have been able to do that. And part of my master's degree, I was able to make my first ribbon skirt. And a ribbon skirt really is just something, for me, it's a identity to show who I am as an Anishinaabe Kwe. It also shows resilience. It shows a connection to the earth, and it shows cultural heritage. So when you see ribbon skirts, if you haven't seen one, I'm sure you can Google it. But when you see ribbon skirts, that's how we kind of identify ourselves and have that solidarity. And I feel connected with the culture when I wear it. And in fact, I'm wearing it today because every time I speak, it gives me courage and strength. And there's a spiritual connection to it that I didn't know I was going to have when I made it. But I actually got to make it in one of my classes because they said, we need to do an ethnography. So where do I go? To the tribe, because that's who I know. And I got to sit in and watch people and ask them if they thought this was helping revitalize the culture. And it was a resounding yes. And then getting to make the ribbon skirt was just an added bonus to it, which I will forever cherish that. But then also with my college, having the flexibility to learn about Indigenous education and being able to wrap all of my assignments in that has been a really good testament to Western Michigan University and the flexibility that their teachers have to be able to help people use their own culture to learn the things they need to learn. And it ties in perfectly with the work that I do. Next part of my journey in summer of 2023, I was able to go on an experiential education trip, and we followed the Ojibwe migration route. We had a 15-passenger van, and 7 of us piled into it, and we started from New York City and took a long journey up to the top of New York, up to Montreal, Canada, across to the Niagara Falls there in Ontario, made our way back home through Detroit. But along the way, we stopped at different cultural spots and we went to museums to see cultural exhibits. We stopped and talked to people that were friends of the person who was leading us and learned from them as well. So it was like a life learning thing all along the way. And so I did a lot of crying, a lot of laughing. I learned a lot and I definitely had to process a lot. But it was helping me to shape who I am. And I think the neatest thing that came out of that was just really finally understanding that the people I was looking at, that I was reading about, were my own people. They were Anishinaabe people. And until you get away from the thing of seeing, oh, this is what the Native Americans did, when you read it as a third person, but when you put it internally and you realize that was your people, it just takes on a whole new meaning. So that experiential education of having that feeling and going through that was just something that added a new level of depth of learning. So it's not just reading about it in a book, hearing a story about it, writing about it, but you experience it. So that's kind of the way that we learn and that we are hoping to get others to learn and to teach in that experiential way because it's so important. So honoring connections is what I'm doing here today by telling you my story because it's filled with connections. We need to honor connections with people, land, culture, nature, and our experiences with them. So my job, my roles, my relationships, my experiences and my Anishinaabe identity are all connected in the work that I'm called to do. My passion is to help students to be seen, and be heard, and that's what we hope to accomplish with the work that we're doing in the history. So, miigwech.
Miigwech, Michelle, for opening your heart with us and starting us out in that way. I think that's really important. Ani pujuan deno maganadok, Anishinaabe odawa kwendao, waganaxin odawa and doda bandagwas, name and dodem, Anishinaabe aki and donjaba, Jordan do jaganashi noswin, and nada wenjige and donangje nahao. Hello, relatives. I was taught by my elders and language teachers that when we talk about important things, we always should begin in Anishinaabe Moan, which is our language. I am still learning, so I will ask for your patience as I do my best to honor those teachings today. Being a language learner means being a lifelong learner, and that's part of what we're talking about today here too. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jordan Shinanaquit. I'm a citizen of the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians, and I'm Sturgeon Clan. I currently work for the Michigan Department of Education's Indigenous Education Initiative, and I'm grateful to be here with you all today. Before we begin, though, talking about the essential understandings, I want to actually begin with one of the most powerful ways we arrive at work like this, and that's through storytelling. Storytelling is how we remember. Storytelling is how we pass forward teachings, responsibilities, and truths. Storytelling is how we understand who we are and what we're called to do, just like Michelle was talking about. In Anishinaabe ways of knowing, storytelling is not just a way to pass the time. It is education. It is ceremony. It is memory. Storytelling moves us. Storytelling creates action. Today, Michelle and I are not just presenting information. We're sharing part of a story, one that's still unfolding, a story that belongs to all of us, because this work isn't just ours, it's yours too, and we're inviting you into it. The story Michelle shared at the start of this webinar of not being seen in the classroom, of feeling invisible, is not separate from this work. It is the work. Because the essential understandings for Michigan are not abstract. They're about visibility. They're about voice. They're about truth. They're about all of our children being able to see themselves in the story of this place. They call on each of us as educators, leaders, and relatives to show up differently, to learn with care, to teach with courage, to act with responsibility. Storytelling teaches us that knowledge is never separate from relationships. And that brings us to the heart of where this work truly begins, and that's with relationships. In Anishinaabe ways of knowing, everything begins with relationship. It shapes how we learn, how we lead, and how we live. Relationship is not just something we have, it's something we practice. It's a commitment, a responsibility, and that understanding that we are always in relationship grounds how we approach education, systems, and community. For Michelle and I, this work lives within the co-governance partnership between the Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments and the Indigenous Education Initiative. Together, CMTED and IEI are co-governance partners, and we carry shared responsibility, shared decision-making, and a shared commitment to transforming education together. These relationships aren't just behind-the-scene partnerships. They're central to how this work lives, grows, and reaches our communities. And when we say relationships, we mean many. Relationships among Indigenous educators, knowledge keepers, and families, relationships between tribal nations and state partners, relationships between systems and the students they serve. The essential understandings are one expression of that work, of what becomes possible when relationships are centered. Because they didn't start as a document, they started as a story. This work began like all meaningful work in our communities, in relationship and through stories. Long before there was a document called The Essential Understandings for Michigan, there were kitchen tables, there were late night phone calls, there were stories shared in offices, in classrooms, and at community gatherings. From the beginning, The Essential Understandings for Michigan was guided by relationship. Relationship among tribal education departments across the state through CMTED, relationships between CMTED and IEI, and relationships with our elders, youth, language speakers, educators, and community members, both in tribal communities and urban Native spaces. We studied frameworks from states like Montana, Oregon, and Wisconsin. They gave us inspiration, but we knew Michigan needed a different path, one rooted in the voices, histories, and ways of knowing from the Indigenous people here. The Anishinaabe, that is, the Ojibwe, the Odawa, the Potawatomi, and all the Indigenous relatives who have come to call this place home. This isn't something that could be borrowed. It had to be built from within, by us, for all of us. For us, it's pretty black and white. This is why relationship is not just a theme. It is the method. It is the how and the why. The essential understandings are a reflection of that, not just in content, but in process. They were co-created through many layers of connection, community to community, educator to educator, generation to generation. They didn't come from a textbook. They came from listening. We listened to our elders, to our students, to our language speakers and knowledge keepers. And when we say we prioritize Indigenous knowledge systems as the expert perspectives in our work, we do. We kept coming back to these relationships, checking, refining, making sure that the work stayed grounded in community, in accountability, and in the multitude of truths that can exist at the same time. That's why these essential understandings are not just a set of ideas. They're a living expression of what becomes possible when we lead with relationship. And when we lead with relationship, the impact reaches far beyond any one classroom or community. This work is for Indigenous students, yes, but it's also for every learner in Michigan, because foundational knowledge of the Anishinaabe is not a supplement. It is not extra, it is essential. And today, as we share this with you, we're not asking for perfection, we're asking for participation and a willingness to be open to learn something new. This is a shared journey, one that invites all of us, Native and non-Native, to sit with the complexity, to stay curious, and to deepen our relationships. And most importantly, to show up first as learners. Because in Indigenous education, relationship and learning are inseparable. Before we can teach well, we have to be willing to learn differently. Not just new facts or histories, but new ways of listening, new ways of seeing, and new ways of being in community. When we show up as learners, especially in spaces that are unfamiliar or maybe a little uncomfortable, we open the door to deeper connection. And when we're connected, we listen differently, we learn differently, and we begin to create spaces where all learners, including ourselves, can truly belong. This is why Ginwe ke kinamadwe nde kinamadamen. We learn together. We're all in this together and we're all learning together. So after all that we've shared about story, about relationship, about responsibility, you might be wondering, what exactly are the essential understandings still? They're not just a document or a checklist. They're a living framework, key concepts and foundational truths that everyone in Michigan should know about the Anishinaabe. That is the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi, the people of the three fires, is sometimes what we're also called. These teachings are rooted in our lived histories, our land, our languages, and our responsibilities. They speak to a shared future we're all part of shaping. They reflect truths that have always been carried in our communities, and now they're also being extended as an invitation to you. Developed by Anishinaabe educators, cultural bearers, knowledge keepers, community members across Michigan, the essential understandings for Michigan emerged from years of collective listening, co-creation, and commitment. They draw strength from the same relationships we've been talking about among tribal nations, educators, students, families, and community members. They named the what, the foundational knowledge and perspective that should shape how we teach, how we learn, and how we relate to one another in this place we now share. The essential understandings are grounded in Anishinaabe lifeways and values, acknowledging the historical truths and present realities, committed to visibility, respect, and belonging. And most importantly, they're intended for all learners across Michigan. And today we're going to share them with you. Not all the pages of the text, but the distilled truths, the heart of each one. because these aren't meant to be memorized. They're meant to be returned to again and again and again. So one of the things Michelle and I would like to walk you through is each of the 15 essential understandings that you see here on the screen. You'll notice that each of the essential understandings includes translations in Anishinaabemowin, in both in both Ojibwe-Moan and Potawatomi dialects. Michelle and I are going to demonstrate our learning together and read them together. I'm going to be reading the Ojibwe-Moan, and Michelle will read the Potawatomi and the English translation, along with a brief summary of each of those essential understandings. We are both still language learners. You'll hear us stumble a bit, sound things out, and maybe even pause to breathe through a tricky pronunciation. But know that that's the point. This isn't about perfection. This is about honoring our languages and modeling what it means to be a learner, even if it's a little uncomfortable, even if it's on a Zoom with over 200 people. That's something all of us are being asked to do in this work, is to try and to be open. So, Anishinaabe, Ajamadzwen, Nagi Doang, Anishinaabe.
Yayak, identity and diversity. Indigenous communities are diverse, each with a unique cultural identity that connects with other Indigenous groups and non-Anishinaabe people. Anishinaabe identity is shaped by language, kinship, traditions, and spiritual interactions, evolving over time and influencing future generations.
Gitchi Pedak Sujik, Nde, Ndwe Dagunak.
Ga Che Pete Andog Wazajuk. Sacred relatives. Anishinaabeg honor deep interconnectedness with all of creation. It shapes identity, spirituality, and the role of Earth's caretakers.
Anishinaabe Kendaswan.
Nishnaabe Mbwak Zawin. Indigenous knowledge systems. Anishinaabe holds sacred knowledge through languages, practices, and teachings, emphasizing experiences as vital for resilience and innovative solutions.
Matukin Minwa Jewen Dawin.
Sowa Winagawin. Sharing and generosity. Anishinaabe hold value in sharing and generosity, expressing gratitude to the land through seasonal gifts and freely sharing resources and wisdom for the community's collective well-being.
Eje Nuendazang Minwa Eje Nakmak.
Indodam Nanuk. Kinship systems. Anishinaabe understanding family beyond biological connections, emphasizing shared experiences and clan structures to strengthen relationships and community well-being.
Bopwin.
Bapawin. Hold on. Sense of humor. Anishinaabe embrace humor as a teaching tool, using stories and laughter to impart moral lessons, cope with adversity, and strengthen communal bonds.
Nigan Nabing.
Nigan e je nabjigadak. Foresight. Anishinaabe utilize the gift of foresight to consider the long-term impact of actions on future generations, emphasizing the responsibility to protect the interests of all beings.
Nuewen.
Jeshmoan. Language. Anishinaabemowin, with its diverse dialects, preserves cultural identity, connects communities to the land, and carries ancestral knowledge and spirituality.
Bandagzan.
Je Debandag Wajuyak. Citizenship and political affiliation. Tribal governance has evolved over time. The tribal nations maintain sovereign authority to define their own citizenship criteria, which may vary between nations. Anishinaabeg holds citizenship in their tribal nation, First Nation, as well as citizenship in the U.S. and/or Canada.
Meskoganiging Gisogayang.
Ezra Nakwinid Zuyak. Sovereignty. Tribal nations have inherent sovereignty that predates the United States and Michigan, granting them authority to govern their people, lands, air, and waters. Tribes continue to exercise self-determination, maintain government-to-government relationships, and assert treaty rights.
Shagnoshkang Minwa Ejibos Be Gipa.
Gawawid Madyak. International treaties. Treaties are binding international agreements that define the relationship between tribal nations and the United States, reserving rights that Anishinaabe nations have held since time immemorial. While these treaties remain legally upheld, they are often not fully honored, leading Anishinaabe nations to continue advocating for the restoration of their treaty rights and promised concessions.
Anishinaabe Aki.
Anishinaabe Ke. Anishinaabe land. Anishinaabe Aki, the ancestral homelands of the Anishinaabeg people, spans the Great Lakes region across the U.S. and Canada, where Anishinaabeg communities exist and thrive in diverse settings. Due to forced removals, land theft, and treaties signed under duress, tribal lands today are often fragmented, and many tribal nations continue to restore their original land base.
Chiza Zigwa Gabajewebat Jabewid Anadadang.
Wabie Jawabuk. Time, continuity, and change. Anishinaabeg history is a complex and enduring story of cultural persistence, adaptation, and resistance, deeply tied to the lands of the Anishinaabe Aki. Through distinct historical periods, from creation to harmful assimilation practices to nation revitalization, Anishinaabeg have continuously demonstrated resilience while facing challenges, shaping both the future and the formation of the United States and Michigan.
Mushkaniging Aki Anishinaabe.
Ejur Nishok Ma Gayak. Global impact. Anishinaabe have always engaged in trade and exchange, forging connections across vast intertribal and international networks. Responses to colonial arrival and expansion, resistance, alliances, and concessions shaped Anishinaabe societies in ways that reflect the resilience and adaptability of Indigenous peoples globally. Anishinaabe experiences of rapid change parallel those of other Indigenous nations, highlighting the lasting impression of colonial forces on sovereignty, economies, and cultural continuity.
Anishinaabe Ga Miigwed.
Je Nishok Mo Magayak. Anishinaabe contributions. Anishinaabe have influenced society through knowledge, technologies, and cultural practices. As sovereign nations continue to manage resources, set economic policies, and contribute to various fields.
Miigwech Michelle. I appreciate you being vulnerable with me and practicing our Anishinaabe. You know, one of the things that we've talked about a lot as a co-governance partner, as individuals in relationship with one another doing this work, um, it's important that we privilege and put Anishinaabe in our language in this work, that and how we talk about it. And even though we're still language learners ourselves, and we recognize so many of us are language learners, there's so much meaning in language. And when we can show that, hey, we're not perfect at this either, and we want to show you that we're not, because we know that this will be part of that expectation. Um, you know, but when you make place for language, that's what matters, and making sure that we all try. And again, shout out to Jen Saylor at the very beginning, you know, exercising her Anishinaabe Moan as well. I just think that's really important, and grateful for that. One of the things I want to point out too about the essential understandings, you notice that there were images beside each of the essential understandings. And I want to let you all know that that is not intentional. It was actually quite intentional. Those are artist renditions of signature marks that appeared in our treaties over time. You know, these are original designs created by an Anishinaabe artist, Faith Corona Pago, but they were inspired by signatures and clan symbols found on our treaties, especially those with educational provisions. And you know, these markings are more than just artwork. They're a visual reminder that our ancestors negotiated, signed, and fought to protect our right to education, not as assimilation, but as a tool for survival, sovereignty, and that cultural continuity. And, you know, each of these symbols tie us back to those original signers, those connection points, leaders who um, knew the importance of education for us in the past, but as well as the future, and where we're at today. And so, you know, these symbols are a reminder that this work is not new. It's really a continuation. And I just wanted to show some examples of some of the treaties that we were looking at when we were working on those different clan signatures and signature markings. These are often how our treaties were signed, because our identity is not just ourself, it's our community, it's our clan, it's our relationships that we have with one another. And just again, a shout out and Chimigwech to Faith, our designer and artist behind the gorgeous clan signature marks that we see in our work now. So you also might be wondering, so what? Why does this matter so much? And I'm here to tell you it matters because stories shape reality. What we teach and just as importantly, what we leave out determines whose humanity we see, whose lives are acknowledged, whose voices are heard, and whose futures are imagined. It matters because of that little girl right there. And just like Michelle's story too, when Michelle opened today by sharing her story of what it felt like to be invisible in the classroom, that story is not hers alone. It echoes across generations of Indigenous students, and it continues to echo in classrooms today, where too many young people, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, move through school never learning the truth about this land or its first peoples. They learn myths, stereotypes, or worse, nothing at all. This silence is not neutral. It shapes how Indigenous students see themselves and how their peers see themselves too. And in that absence, harmful narratives can take root. The essential understandings offer another path, one grounded in truth, connection, and responsibility. The essential understandings matter because they call each of us into this work, not with shame, but with purpose. Whether you are Indigenous or non-Indigenous, an educator, administrator, or community member, you have a role in shaping the stories that are told and the relationships that are built. These understandings aren't just for the history class. They're for hallway conversations, curriculum choices, morning meetings. They're for everyday moments where there are opportunities to support belonging. And while they offer a vital foundation, we know, because we've heard it directly from educators like you, that the essential understandings alone are not enough. Educators need more, and they need support and tools to do this work as well. That is why It's important to mention too, the essential understandings are not standalone. They're actually part of something bigger, a larger journey we're all on together. Since the beginning of this work, we've also heard from educators like you, passionate, committed, honest. You told us that you truly want to engage in Indigenous histories and perspectives, but you need more than just concepts. You need context, you need support, you need time to learn, reflect, and prepare. And you need tools that are practical, meaningful, and grounded. And that's why the essential understandings are part of this foundational effort and a broader effort that we're working on that lay that foundation, the groundwork for deeper learning ahead. Um, I want to take a moment too, because this is part of the story we're talking about, to talk about a moment in time in 2022. The Confederation of Michigan Tribal Education Departments, or CMTED, is what we've mentioned this evening, partnered with MDE's IEI, the Indigenous Education Initiative, where we received our first ever state appropriation for funding. This funding marked a significant milestone for us. It was the first time in our history ever to receive funding that was designated to support the design, implementation, and evaluation of professional learning opportunities and optional curriculum modules focused on the authentic histories of Michigan's Indigenous peoples. This is where you see Jajaga Gabajabik Megwa Ejabak Wabajabak, or in our Potawatomi dialect, Gabia Jewibik Mine Wa Jewibik. What has happened, what is happening, what will happen. This is a part of the history work that we're also working on as well, and the essential understandings are creating that foundation for us. This larger work, beyond just the history work and the essential understandings, includes a whole variety of educator resources too. Foundational documents like the essential understandings, curriculum aligned through the essential understandings, educator-facing professional development, online learning modules, and many other resources that are currently in development. So in many ways, today is just a preview, a first glimpse, if you would, into a broader, layered body of work that's being shaped with intention and care. Every part of this effort is being created in relationship with tribal nations, with educators, and with deep respect for community voice. Now, we also want to acknowledge a question that may or may not be on your mind. We're educators here, so I'm sure it's on your mind. When will these resources be available? I see Michelle chuckling. We hear you. The timeline for release is currently in development, just so you know. As this work continues to take shape, we are committed to keeping you informed and we'll be sharing clearer details in the months ahead. Because we know real change doesn't come from simply rolling out new curriculum. It comes from transforming the relationships, understanding, and commitments that surround it. So, as we close, we return to where we began, with story, with relationship, and with responsibility. The essential understandings invite us into deeper connection with history, with community, and with ourselves as learners. They remind us that education isn't just about what we know, but how we come to know it and who we're accountable to along the way. This is just the beginning, and we're looking forward to walking this path with you, offering more supports, more learning, and more opportunities to grow together. So with that, I say, Ambe, come and learn with us. There's room for you here. Chi miigwech. We have that. And then also we have our contact information at the end. I'll leave this slide up because I know that there will be an opportunity for questions at this time. But chi miigwech again for the opportunity to be here today with Michelle and share some of the work that has taken a number of years in the making to be in this moment, in this time to share with all of you. And with that, I say chi miigwech.
Thank you, Jordan and Michelle and Vanda. We do have a few minutes and we have some questions that have come in. So if you're open for them, I can just share with you what has been shared with us. So our first question is, can you say more about the parts of the image on the first slide with the girl with the backpack, the water, the trees, the turtle, the sturgeon? And I know you wanted to keep that up, but yeah, the very first slide you had up.
There we go.
She was on the journey with us, so she's there. Michelle, do you want to take this question?
Sure.
Or okay.
Sure. So way back when, we were all together brainstorming what did we want this history work to look like. And all of us had different perspectives of what we thought that question meant, and we all drew our own things. Well, Melissa Isaac was the one who drew this one, well, a rendition of this one. And it was really her perspective of a Anishinaabe girl looking into the world. And the type of artwork this is called Manadu. And if you notice, everything is connected together. And that's basically how we have looked at this work, is that everything is connected: the land, the people, the water, the crawling beings, the swimming beings, the flying beings, everything is connected together. And so she was drawing this from the perspective of an Anishinaabe girl, because that's how we want the curriculum, the modules, everything to be looked at through a different lens. And so this was her idea. And then she had her best friend actually recreated it for her with an artistic style, and gifted it to her and gifted it to us so that we could use it in this history work that we are doing. So that's kind of the meaning behind it. And there's a strawberry in there because everybody that knows Melissa knows that she loves strawberries. So, so that's what that was all about.
It's also the heartberry for us. It's shaped like a little heart, and this is the heart work for us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. That's a lot to learn and a lot to share just from one image. Michelle, you mentioned Melissa Isaac. Can you just share who Melissa Isaac is for those of us who may not know her, who aren't lucky enough to know her yet?
Yes, she's a powerhouse. So Melissa Isaac was once CMTED chair for Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe, and now she works for the Indigenous Education Initiative. I can't remember what her name is. Jordan might could help me out, but I know it means to protector of the young is what it translates to.
He's Wassid.
Okay. But she has done a lot of work with Indigenous education. She's been to the White House wearing a ribbon skirt, if you saw that part, when President Biden was in office. But she just has done a lot of community work, and she just continues to represent us all well. So great woman to know if you get a chance. Don't want to miss it.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, our next question is, Jordan shared that relationship and learning are inseparable. How can I, as an educator, grow my relationship with Indigenous people to grow my learning about Indigenous people?
That is a beautiful question, and grateful that you're asking that. The simple answer, and it's not always so simple, but it's showing up, and it's reaching out and not stopping to. I'm sure you'll hear many stories as the more you get to know us and our team, and we're very much a storytelling group, and that's how we relate and understand the world and make connection points. But one of the early stories about even the beginning of CMTED's relationship with IEI was just kept showing up, even though we were not. They didn't have an invitation at the table to begin with, but there's something to be said about showing up and building that relationship. We do have a couple of different resources too. They're more in relation to like consultation, but some of it's just like, how do you engage with like your extended relatives and do so in a respectful way where it's not extractive. It's not like it's one that honors that. But those are things that we're taking into consideration when we're thinking about the professional development too, because we recognize that beyond the curriculum itself, there are gaps, and we want to be able to offer more supports for exactly those type of things. But in the short answer, keep showing up right now.
Well, and just as a side note, Jordan and Michelle, if you have some resources or things that you'd like us to share, we can always share out with the folks who are registered or who participated this evening. So if you have anything you want to follow up with, we're happy to help get that information out. Okay, for another question, you mentioned the people of the three fires. Can you share what that means?
So the three fires is the three basic, not really tribes because we have several tribes, but three peoples. So the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi. So those are the three peoples who live in Michigan. There are other indigenous peoples in Michigan too, but that's the tribes are all Odawa, Ojibwe, or Potawatomi. So that's the three fires. In the past, we've all worked together. Like each people had a different thing that they had to do, and so it's just how we've always worked together. And in this project, we've always worked together. So we make sure that we have the voices of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi people in the making of the curriculum, the modules, and everything that we're working on. We have all voices at the table.
Another way to talk about that too, and Michelle, I love the way you described it. Think of Anishinaabe as a big umbrella term that then describes our relationship with the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and our Potawatomi relatives. We're all relatives, but we do have some distinctions within us too. But think of Anishinaabe as that big umbrella term. Then you have our respective Odawa, Ojibwe, Potawatomi. From there, it goes down to different bands. Like I said, my nation is the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians, Bay Bands, excuse me. Whereas Michelle, your Grand Traverse Band. So think of it like big umbrella and then something like that. But we recognize again that those are part of some of the foundational knowledge that that folks need to know. And so those are things that we're taking into consideration and trying to build out for those professional development supports for our educators.
And if I may, Jordan and Michelle, I can attest to learning from you both some of those concepts that you just shared. And it really, I'm so grateful for what you do share, both from your the stories and the historical side of it, and just sharing explanations like that, because I have learned so much from you both, and others who have help with my learning. Here's a very along the note of people. The question is, how many people make up Michigan's tribal nations?
Wow. Well, there's 12 federally recognized tribes in Michigan. There are some state recognized that are not federally recognized. And for a number, I have no idea. Some tribes have like 4,000. Some tribes have like, hundreds. So do you have a number on that, Jordan?
I don't have a specific number, but that's definitely something that we can compile in our logistic or in our, that's definitely something we can compile.
It's a lot.
That's great.
Yeah,
and we can follow up with the responses for sure. The next question is, do you visit schools to talk about Indigenous history?
Well, we definitely have a relationship with schools for sure. There's different team members, part of the Indigenous Education Initiative as well as CMTED that depending on what the nature of the need is, we do go out or have different relationships with folks. And as we begin to launch the essential understandings and the history curriculum work, there will be a need to have even more relationship with our schools and being able to provide those supports. So it's something we have in existence, but we're wanting to strengthen those as well.
Yeah, and the education offices, some of us go and read to kids, like during March's Reading Month, we get to go in and read. But we also have our culture department, which is a whole nother thing, and they actually go into the schools and teach cultural things. So yeah, there's people from environmental, there's so many different parts of each tribe that can have a part in education. So it just kind of depends on what the request is.
And I'm wondering, maybe if we are going to be sharing information with folks, if there's just contact information or something that we could share out, if that would be a good. Oh yeah, and Jordan, you had your slide ready to go. There we go. And if there's anything you want us to share more along those lines, specific places for people to reach out. But Michelle, you kind of hinted at the next question. Are there any children's and young adult books you would recommend? You just mentioned going out and reading in school. So do you have any books you'd recommend?
So we are actually working on that, and as part of our history work that we're doing, we have a literature review guide that we are taking. Actually, we looked at, was it Washington, Jordan, or Oklahoma?
California. It was
Sorry.
the ways of like
One of those nations. Yeah.
graves. Yep.
Yeah, they already have a website with a lot of Indigenous authors that we're pulling from. So maybe we could give them that website so they can kind of see what we're working from. But we are putting together in our curriculum questions and such that go along with our own frameworks. But there are a lot of Indigenous books. We can share that information.
We should also share Mendonguinon, the resource, the social studies resource guide that CMTED and IEI worked on in collaboration a couple of years ago. There are several book recommendations in there as well.
And you know what? I think I'm just gonna share this question. We just have about 3 minutes left. It might be require a longer answer, but we can, if you want to share something along these lines. But I even think that that resource, Jordan, would help as well. But what might a practical example of a lesson using the essential understandings look like? And if it's something you'd want to hold off and respond to when we share information, that works too.
Michelle?
What? So, um,
I think that we could hold off on this because, man, there's so much we want to share. But those are definitely things that we're thinking of and have been working on. Because one of the things that was listed in our, especially at the history work, with the appropriation language, is like evaluation too. So we're wanting to make sure we're evaluating our processes to make sure that they are practical in classrooms or have that kind of application. But I think that would be best if we hold off on that for now and leave it as take this presentation today as a invitation. It's an invitation to continue working with us, learning with us, and being in relationship with us. This is just the start, and we hope you join us because we have so many things we're working on, and we want you to be part of it to help support you and learn and grow together for all of us.
Well, thank you so much, Jordan. And thank you, Michelle, for sharing this important work and modeling learning and belonging for all of us today. Your efforts and the invitation you just gave us all, Jordan, are important to Michigan's educators and leaders as they provide support for teaching comprehensive history within our classrooms. We sincerely appreciate you helping us learn more deeply about honoring connections that create essential understandings. And as Dr. Rice reminds us, that as members of a diverse state, nation, and world, school staff and students need to know our rich, complex history. These powerful webinars, along with the provided resources, encourage Michigan educators and school leaders to deepen their knowledge. As searing as some of our history is, we have a responsibility to teach it all. Please join us in upcoming webinars. Registration links may be found at the Teaching Comprehensive History website. We encourage all educators to visit Michigan Virtual and the Teaching Comprehensive History websites to revisit past webinars, gain access to incredible resources, earn more sketches, and register for future webinars. Thank you all for the work you do for Michigan students. Thank you all for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.